a free evolutionary simulation on the web. Um, Very simple evolutionary simulation, but hopefully that's one of its strengths. Um, so, in this simulation, we have critters, which are one or more cells that have a genome, which essentially is a series of instructions which are executed. Initially, the world is seeded by photosynthesized critters. And here you can see a tally of all the critters in the simulation, their instructions, what their instructions do, and their count. So, the top critter right now by far is photosynthesize. What photosynthesize does is the critter will gain energy every turn. When a critter has enough energy, it will spawn, so we'll have an offspring. And if the mutation rate is not zero, the offspring may have a mutation in its genome. So an instruction randomly added or deleted or modified. And if you go to the Insert tab, this allows you to insert your own critter or a critter that evolved elsewhere. So we could just do something like this. Um, this gives a list of all the instructions, all the available instructions and what they do. So this critter would eat, move, and turn right. And we can insert 1,000 of these just for fun. Okay, so here they are. And the population is kind of, well, it's fluctuating. If we turn up the speed here to it is pretty slow. It goes all the way up to 11. Um, but yeah, we can see, they actually are doing okay, although um, starting to go down. I'm not sure what this one does here. This one just has another instruction. Okay, so critters are normally as long as the numbers of instructions in their genome. If we go to settings, oh, well, that was interesting and kind of sad. Um, in this last run, the population seemed to crash. That's what happens when you mess around with evolution. Um, but what I was going to say is that in the settings area, there are a lot of different settings that you can play around with. One of them is the maximum number of cells, but by default, a critter is going to be as long as its genome, limited to the maximum number of cells. And there's also an instruction to limit the number of cells for a critter within the genome. So that's the limit critter's length. If that appears within the genome, the critter will be shorter. We'll have fewer cells. Okay. Um, so if we look in the magnifying glass here, we can see some critters. The triangle indicates their head and the direction their head is oriented. So these particular critters are, I believe they're these. They execute a photosynthesis instruction. And eat, enter a hyper mode, which lets them execute more instructions per turn, although it costs more energy, and a move. They're not that exciting, but they seem to be doing kind of well. Once again, critters either photosynthesize or they eat to gain energy. So what eating does is if the head is touching a green cell of another critter, it will transfer energy from that critter to it, or a green food dot. So there are green food dots which are non-living. If a critter starves to death, it will turn to green food dots. And you can also control. So there's this add food setting. So this is something you can do. This will cause. See these little squares there? They, as opposed to the round dots, they're just simply food dots. Any critter that eats will gain energy from them. So many things you can tweak here. So I'd like just to kind of close here by switching to something that I think is kind of interesting. So these are two critters here, two different genomes that evolved, which have very different strategies. And you can just see, looking at the genome, this one doesn't have a photosynthesize instruction. It has an eat instruction. And this one doesn't have an eat instruction. It has a photosynthesize instruction. So this one, they gain their energies clearly in very different ways. Um, this one, we can zoom in here. So again, these evolve through random processes. So the genomes might not make a whole lot of sense to us. Like, I am a programmer. I would not put an else before the if, but that's how this evolved, and it works just fine. Instructions are executed from the top, going down to the bottom, and then looping up to the top again. But in this case, I think it makes sense to start at the if. So what's happening here is this critter says, well, if I can see food, I'm going to execute an eat instruction, just in case there's food directly in front of my head, I guess, and then move forward. And interestingly, it's going to turn its head to the right. I'm not quite sure why it's doing that, but that is what it's doing. But if I don't see food, then I'm going to turn my head to the left. So it seems like it has some strategy, which seems to be working for it, for looking for food. Probably there's a better strategy which would evolve if we crank the speed up. But this critter here is more complicated, even though it's going to have fewer instructions because it uses this instruction to limit its length. So this critter, again, we'll start at the if. It says if it's bitten, then it's going to do a number of things here. It's going to turn its head, it's going to move, and then it's going to turn its head again, move again. So if it's bitten, it's going to try to sort of evade. And then photosynthesize. And then do nothing. So the else just immediately goes to the if. So basically, if bidden, it's going to do all these things. Otherwise, nada. Kind of interesting. I don't fully understand this, but we can look to see what it's actually doing by turning the speed up. What appears to be happening is both of these critters are avoiding moving as much as possible because moving uses energy. But one critter is responding. One critter moves when it sees food. One critter moves when it detects that it's been bitten. And hopefully we'll get to see that in action here. I feel like I'm sort of a virtual wildlife naturalist here. But yeah, you can see this guy here, this green guy who just is going to have an offspring. It just had an offspring just now. Kind of exciting. So, as long as these aren't bitten, they're photosynthesizing. They're going to keep gaining energy until they have enough to have an offspring. But let's just see what happens if one of these is bitten. Yeah. So there it was. Yep. And there it was again. Well, it moved in response to being bitten, but eventually it got eaten, looks like. Let's just crank up the speed and see what happens here. I think that there are more efficient strategies which could evolve, but I thought this was kind of interesting to look at. Hope you did too. Bye.